When I started practicing law years ago, I noticed very quickly that the cards were stacked against innocent accident victims. That's not right. That's why my law firm is dedicated to working exclusively on behalf of those who need it the most. I'm Brian Goldfinger of Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. When you're in an accident, we can help you get the compensation you deserve. Visit goldfingerlaw.com and get us working for you.
Get Goldfinger today.
Welcome to Raptors Weekly for the week of January the 18th. It's a solo podcast today. Just Zarar with you here today. No guests with me this week, mostly because it's been a very light week with only one game against the Magic on the books, and people are away, which means that it falls on me. And instead of not doing a podcast, I thought I'd get together with myself and talk for about 15 to 20 minutes, or maybe even less, about what's been going on and what's upcoming for the Raptors. And next week we'll resume regular service of the podcast with a whole host of guests and like you're used to and so on. So this week it's been fairly quiet. The Raptors have been in London to face the Magic. The game was on Thursday at the O2 Arena. A lot of the pictures coming from Instagram and Twitter and whatnot from the players seems to be they seem to have had a good time. A lot of team bonding going on there in London, so it's got to be good for the team. And the game itself, very disappointing. I think both from a TV viewership perspective and also from a in-game viewing perspective. Except that it went to overtime. It was kind of weird. It was a really ugly game. The Raptors shot 33% for that game on Thursday at the O2 Arena. The Magic shot 39%. DeMarre DeRozan and Kyle Lowry were a combined 9 of 39 in that game, so they did not have good games. But it was a tight game. It was ugly. It was tight, and it went to overtime. And Corey Joseph had a pretty big game for us, and we pulled it off in OT. So that had to be good. The venue itself, the O2 Arena, it wasn't a sold out game. I thought it might have been sold out this time around. These games rarely are sold out, and this time the attendance was 18,700 or so, and the capacity in the building is about 20,000. But it's certainly a lot more than what we had there last time around, especially when the Raptors and Nets played there. I think they played a back-to-back doubleheader there, which was not good. Andrea Bargnani played in those games, and I think we lost both, I want to say, but I just can't remember. It was not a memorable event by any means. So other than that, there really hasn't been much going on from Raptorland. The only talk this week has been of the All-Star weekend and how both DeMarre DeRozan and Kyle Lowry right now sit sort of outside the starting positions when it comes to guards. Lowry is probably the most the most likely to make it to second if one of them makes it. He's about 30,000 behind Kyrie Irving in that race, and so I think a lot of fans are like calling for Drake and or Justin Bieber or somebody to RT it, and so they narrow this gap fairly quickly. And Drake actually stepped up to the plate, except he did it on Instagram, where it's really hard to retweet and do that kind of stuff. So basically his tweet counts as like his Instagram post basically counts as one vote. So I would think that Drake would figure it out and post this on Twitter, so we can actually make a run for it, because what he's doing right now isn't really helping. But I would think he knows how Instagram and Twitter works, given that he's sixth god and all that. So I expect a tweet coming up shortly, which should close this gap. But if it doesn't happen, it's quite conceivable that both Kyle Lowry and DeMarre DeRozan could be voted as part of the backcourt. It's Lowry for sure. DeMarre DeRozan's a maybe on that end, but it could still happen because the NBA is fixed and all that, and they would like to see the two hometown guys get their run, and I think it would be good. So that was essentially the week. So we await on what's going to happen with the whole Twitter thing. Other than that, the schedule has been a bit weird. It's before the Raptors. Right now, the Raptors just finished a 5-game road trip, which was which saw them beat the Magic to finish it off. On that road trip, they went 4-1 with the only loss coming to Cleveland. So a successful road trip, even though they lost the one game that really would have said something about the team. The other wins were sort of routine, I want to say. Brooklyn, Washington, Orlando, Philadelphia, and the loss was in Cleveland. But now they start a 7-game homestand. 7-game homestand. That's rare, man. A 7-game homestand. And the good news here is that you have, I want to say, 5 easy games and 2 tough games. If you look at this homestand, you got Brooklyn on Monday, which is should be routine at home. There's not much to think about there. There's Andrea Bargnani's return, and the Nets are basically trash, so that should be fairly easy. And then you got Boston, who have struggled this year. I think a lot of people expected them to be better defensively and be a lot more tighter defensively and stay in a lot of games, and they haven't been able to do that. They're still, the East has gotten better, and maybe the Celtics kind of weren't expecting that. And right now they're barely hanging on to that 8th spot, a game behind. A game ahead of the Magic. You'll see Kelly Olynyk in that game, who's having a pretty good season. Some might say he's been their second best player essentially for the last 20 games or so. So he's having a bit of a resurgence, and that's good news for Canada basketball. So that's the Celtics, and after that, so I call that an easy game too. Celtics are at home should be doable, and then you got 2 tough games. These are the 2 games that you got to keep an eye on and say Miami and the Clippers. On the 22nd, the Raptors face the Miami Heat. It's at 8 o'clock time, 8 o'clock tip-off time, and the game is on ESPN, so you get national TV coverage down south of the border, which the guys should be pumped up for. And it's Miami coming to, Chris Bosh returns to his hometown and all that stuff. I don't know if we're kind of worn that out yet, but it's still a big game. Miami's still, in the playoff hunt there. They're on a big West Coast swing right now. They've had a couple of big wins. They're 23-18. Game back of the Raptors, so it's one of those teams that's kind of neck and neck with the Raptors in terms of what people think they might do in the playoffs. There's unknowns on both teams. A lot of guys have picked Miami to make a dent in the playoffs, me including. So this should be a good litmus test for the Raptors. They're 1-1 so far against the Heat this season, and after that you get the Clippers at home, which is another telling tale. This one's a Sunday 6 o'clock start. So 2 big games this week, which would really, say a lot about where the Raptors are in terms of really how good they are. Because again, as I said, wins against Brooklyn and Boston, meh, but you win these 2, and it actually says something and solidifies your position. And Jeff Van Gundy actually was talking about the Raptors in the Houston-Cleveland game that was broadcast on ESPN, and he essentially called the Raptors one of the most underrated teams in the league, which was nice to see. And Jeff Van Gundy has always had a bit of a soft spot for the Raptors. Any chance he gets, he tends to shower us with some praise, and it's always appreciated, Jeff. You're most welcome to coach here if you ever decided to coach again. Because with Jeff Van Gundy, we have this we like the guy because he had that incident with Mourning where he hung on to his feet during that Knicks Heat fight, and he kind of almost endears us. There's something about him that fans are really attracted to, that grittiness, that old Knicks style coaching. I don't know. There's something about the guy that makes fans like him. And personally, I mean, I would always like to see what a Jeff Van Gundy coached Raptors team might do. I don't know. At the very least, it would be very, very entertaining. And I remember when he coached, he used to always have these giant black bags under his eyes because he was so into the game, and every post-game presser interview had Jeff Van Gundy looking like just shit, just terrible. It's like he hadn't slept for days. And as soon as he got into broadcasting, his physical appearance got better, and I think it was good for him. I think he might have died. I think if he coached for the Knicks for 3 more years, he might have actually died. The broadcasting thing actually saved his life. So that's Jeff Van Gundy for you. So we're probably going to see him on Friday in Toronto when the Miami Heat play the Raptors. After the Clipper game, you get Washington again, who we've already beaten like 3 times, and then the Knicks and Pistons. The Pistons, I want to say, is a bit of a tough game because they've been playing well, and they just blew out the Golden State Warriors a couple days back, so can't take them lightly. Overall, it's a 7-game home swing, which the Raptors should do quite well in. At least you want to target 5-2 here. Maybe you win one of the games against the Clippers and Heat, and you drop one of those stinkers that every team is kind of due, maybe against the Knicks again or Detroit. But 5-2 should be a good return from this homestand. Obviously 6-1 would be great, but I think 5-2 is a reasonable outcome here. And just moving along, just some player talk. Terrence Ross is having an up and down season. I think his December was fantastic. If you look at his December numbers, they were what we all hoped that we would get for him this season. I think that was something that, let me just pull it up here. Like, yeah, in December he had 10.8 points per game on 42% 3-point shooting. 10.8 points a game on 42% 3-point shooting, and active defensively as well. He was alive in those games, and we saw a lot of Terrence Ross that we expected in preseason, and he delivered in that month. And this was following a November where he was just horrid. 3.6 points a game and 27% 3-point shooting. So horrible November, awesome December. And what does January look like so far? It's somewhere in the middle. I'd say it's actually worse than November. He's at 6.4 points, which is okay, but it's at 24% 3-point shooting. You would think that once DeMarre Carroll, got sidelined, you would see Terrence Ross play a little more freely and James Johnson play a little more freely. It really hasn't happened for Terrence Ross just yet. I don't know if that December was just a flash in the pan or what it was, but he needs to be playing at that level for the Raptors, obviously, to go anywhere this season. And James Johnson, on the other hand, he's gotten a little more playing time. He's at 18 minutes per game in January. This is essentially up from 15 minutes a game in December, which was up from 13 minutes a game in November. So as much as we like to complain about James Johnson's playing time, it is steadily increasing as the season goes along. It's gotten better in November, in December, and also in January. And you expect him to actually produce in DeMarre Carroll's absence, because I think DeMarre Carroll's going to be out for quite some time, just because the Raptors don't want to mess with his injury. You need him for the postseason, and you got to take your time getting him healthy, and hopefully he does that. In the meantime, James Johnson and Terrence Ross are probably the two guys who you expect to deliver the most. Hasn't really happened on either front. James Johnson is playing more. He's scoring okay, 5 points a game. But it's not the big boost that fans might have expected from either of the two. But it's early. I think Carroll's going to be out for quite some time. So I think it's TBD on how these two guys are doing in the absence of DeMarre Carroll. There was a D-League game which I was asked to cover by Blake. It was the Raptors 905 versus Delaware, some team from Delaware. And, I saw it on YouTube. All the games are on YouTube if you want to check it out. And, you really have to be into basketball to enjoy those games, because there's none of those guys have a chance to make it in the NBA. Maybe Ronald Roberts has, and I will talk about him just momentarily. Other than that, it's just a bunch of guys just playing for jobs in Europe, basically. As I watched that game, there was no DeLon Wright, Bruno Caboclo, Bibin Aguera. They were all traveling. So essentially I was left to watch Sim Bhullar and Ronald Roberts, who Sim Bhullar was exactly what you would expect of him. He's a lumbering giant, almost like a character from Game of Thrones. Like when they go north, like beyond the wall, and you see all kinds of like weird giants and the White Walkers and those. That's what Sim Bhullar kind of looks like. He's like he belongs like north of the wall, and he plays like he's north of the wall. He's stuck in snow. Like he's slow. He's lumbering. Essentially, he had one score where he just caught the ball and like raised his hands like a giant and kind of like put it in and walked back up the court. And the one time that he got the ball in a position where he had to kind of evade a defender and maybe fake out somebody and lay it in, he got blocked from behind by a guard or something. He's a long ways away, is what I'm saying. He's a long ways away from a basketball perspective, and he's a long ways away. Because he's beyond the wall. So he's a long ways away just in general. And the other guy that a lot of people want to talk about is Ronald Roberts. He's essentially a skinny power forward who I think wouldn't be a great power forward in the NBA because he doesn't really have range. He's essentially dominating anybody who he comes up against in the D-League because he's nimble, he's athletic, he's just a step ahead mentally. Like he knows what he wants to do before anybody else does, and that just gives him and he's got the quickness to actually execute his move. So he's essentially playing against mannequins there. And again, I think we've talked about that he might get an NBA call up, and somebody on Twitter posted say, well, so why not get him to the big club, to the Raptors? And the answer is that you can't, because you're only allowed 15 roster spots, and it would mean that you would have to cut somebody. And I retweeted the guy and I said, well, who would you cut? And 4 or 5 different people responded with Anthony Bennett. And sure, like I actually think if you bring Ronald Roberts over to the NBA, over to the Raptors, he might actually contribute more than Anthony Bennett. He might, but it wouldn't move the overall needle. Like his contribution wouldn't actually affect the team's fortunes in any extent. Whereas if Anthony Bennett actually becomes a good 3-and-D type guy, or knows how to play a little better defense, he might actually make a larger dent in the team if he decides to play. So as good as Ronald Roberts has been in the D League, a call up to the Raptors just wouldn't work, because he doesn't have range. I don't think he'd be as effective as he is in the D League, obviously, because I think a lot of the moves he makes in the D League won't come off in the NBA. Like a lot of those jump hooks might be a defender might actually catch up to him in the NBA, so he might be forced to do something else, and he doesn't have that effective jumper to kind of free himself up. So but again, even though he might do more than Anthony Bennett in the NBA right now, you're better off hoping that Anthony Bennett reaches that potential that we think he has, or hope he has, than going with Ronald Roberts, who is basically a known quantity. So that's the convoluted logic that's applied there. So that was the D League, man. Try it out. Check out the game. It's on YouTube, but it's on the D League channel. That was their 9th defeat in a row, and today I read on the site that they beat the Westchester Knicks, who were the top team in the Eastern Conference. They beat them, and I don't know. So that's what's going on in the D League. I don't know what else to tell you. I think if you got some time and you got some patience, open up YouTube, find the D League channel, get the Raptors 905 homepage. There's a link from there, and watch some D League basketball. You might enjoy it. You might not. I don't know. It could go either way. And finally, just want to talk about DeMarre DeRozan. I wrote an article. Arse Talk is the branded thing I got going on Raptors Republic now. So I wrote in there that honestly, I'm a little like, before, when the salary cap used to be, came into prominence, and used to really look at what the cap structure looked like, and then you would actually propose a trade, hoping that your team doesn't get hampered by a bad contract. Only then you would actually propose trades, and so on and so forth. I think now people are still trying to figure out what the new era of the NBA CBA looks like. I don't think anybody has quite figured out what's a bad contract, what's an immovable contract, and what's a great contract. We just don't know yet. I think people are making gambles, hoping they pay off. Some people are taking risks. Enes Kanter, I think, was a bit of a weird contract. Brook Lopez was a weird contract. And Corey Joseph at the time might have been considered a weird contract. And Terrence Ross is certainly a weird contract. So you have all these GMs just handing out money, not knowing 100% whether it's a foolish thing to do or it's a great thing to do. But the only option they have is actually offer the money and get the players in. So I think we're too early to say whether the contract that DeMarre DeRozan will be offered, and it will be around $25 million a year or whatever it is, whether it's a max, I don't know. Whatever he will be offered, the jury on that contract won't come back till 2 to 3 years from now, much like DeMarre DeRozan's existing contract. I think you remember at the time it was considered a very premature deal by Brian Colangelo, but 2 years down the road, it looks like an awesome deal. And I think the same is true for DeMarre DeRozan's next contract, where I don't think you'll immediately find out whether it's good or bad. You might have to wait a couple of years and see what the rest of the league looks like. Certainly, I don't have an issue. It's not my freaking money coming out here. I just have a gut feeling that a deal for DeMarre DeRozan does not hamper this franchise. And that's the bottom line. I think that if you sign him to a max deal, you're signing a guy who wants to be here, and a guy who's steadily improved, and who's having a great December and January so far, just prior to the All-Star game. So I don't think he is a guy who will hamstring your team going forward. And if things push comes to shove, you might be able to move him. You will be able to move him if it gets to that. So I would say keep him, not just because he's a good player, but also because you want to keep your free agents. You don't want to be the guy the team that loses free agents. You don't want to be Orlando Magic and Dwight Howard who just can't hang on to free agents. Like we've been here before with Vince Carter, who we couldn't hang on to, Tracy McGrady, Damon Stoudemire, Chris Bosh, and now you got two guys here. You want to keep them together. Now they may not be the best players in the NBA, but they got a chemistry going on. And just from an optics perspective, you got to keep them together because it says a lot about the city when you're able to retain a big name free agent. And DeMarre DeRozan, for that matter, is going to be one of the bigger free agents this summer. So sign him up is what I say. And my final point here on my notebook was about minutes. Minutes played is something that a lot of people are talking about in regards to Kyle Lowry and DeMarre DeRozan. They're playing heavy minutes. Not going to lie, they're 3rd and 6th in the league in terms of minutes played. And the worry here is that Kyle Lowry, over the last 6 of the last 7 seasons, has always had an injury issue in the regular season. Now, granted, this year's Kyle Lowry is different physically, obviously, so he may be able to sustain the pressure more. But at the same time, it is a worry. It is a worry that they're playing heavy minutes because the last thing you want to do is have a repeat of last season where, the last 5-6 games of the season, like Lowry got a rest, for 4 or 5 games towards the end of the season, but then he played the last 3 games of the season, played like 35 minutes, and was essentially a non-factor in the Wizards series. So, fine, you let that happen to you once, but this time around, you just cannot allow that to happen. And I'm sure Dwayne Casey, who's a smart guy, knows this and is tracking this because if it comes down to that, we got an injured Kyle Lowry or a less than 100% DeMarre DeRozan heading into the postseason. We're going to look back at this time where they're playing 38, 37 minutes a game consistently and say, well, what did you expect? So I don't think it's cause for alarm just yet. It is a bit weird when the Raptors like getting blown out or blowing out a team and you see these guys out there. It doesn't compute, but at the same time, you just hope that the coach and the medical staff have that figured out. And obviously, those guys are a lot closer to the players than we are, so we trust them to make the right decision. But hey, just don't make the same mistake you made last year. And essentially, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I don't want to ramble on if I haven't already. So with that, we'll sign off, and next week we'll come back with the roundtable again with some guests and talk about the week that was, and talk about All-Star and all the events and whatnot. Blake's going to be at the All-Star game for us. I might actually be there, so I might sneak in with a press pass and post some pictures and shit. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Just a quick reminder that if you like the Raptors Republic podcast, do check out the Friday podcast, Raptors Weekly Extra with Blake and Will. And also do rate us on iTunes and Stitcher and Android in your mobile device. Just go ahead and rate us. Hopefully it's a good rating. Either way, do go in there and give us a rating and tell us what you think of the podcast, what we can improve, and we'll definitely listen to it. And you can also tweet us at Raptors Republic, where we'll definitely respond. And we like talking to the fans. Hit us up and talk to you guys in 1 week with more guests and less of Zarar blabbing. Talk then. Bye bye.